Nell. I will discuss chapters 2, 3 and 4 of a thesis or dissertation as a unit because they belong together. The literature review can be more than one chapter, depending on the topic of your research and the amount of theory that is needed. You can, for example, have a chapter on the literature study that you did in preparation for the oral presentation of your research proposal, and a second chapter on the literature study that you did additionally after your research proposal was accepted and you embarked on real research. On master's degree level, you will probably not need to prepare and present an oral presentation. Of course, it would not be wrong to do literature study for your thesis, even though you will not need to do an oral presentation. You could also have explained the research approach for your research proposal in your first chapter. You can also explain the research methods that you used for the initial literature study in a second chapter and have a separate chapter dealing with literature study and practical data collection processes as a third chapter. Let me show the options that I discuss here in tables. Chapter 1 can deal with the context for your study and some of the contents of your oral presentation, or it can deal with the context for your study only. For example, if it is a thesis that you were writing, you can explain your research approach to the literature study and field research in your second chapter. Alternatively, chapter 2 can deal with the literature study for the oral presentation only. This option will not apply to master's degree studies, of course. You can also explain the research approach to the literature study in preparation for your oral presentation, as well as the literature study after your research proposal has been accepted in Chapter 2. You can discuss the fieldwork that you did in Chapter 3 as a first or third option. As a second option, you can discuss your literature study as well as your fieldwork in Chapter 3 if you did not discuss your literature study in Chapter 2 already. In essence, you will need to describe the research approach for your literature study prior to presenting your research proposal, the theoretical content that you will research after your research proposal has been accepted, and the fieldwork that you will do. You should identify as much as possible theoretical information on similar research that was previously done, knowledge captured in books and other sources of information, and related knowledge that might be of value for your research. Here are some reasons why you should study literature. Firstly, to prepare for an oral presentation of your research proposal. This will not apply to master's degree studies. Secondly, to familiarize yourself with the knowledge and to determine if it relates to your research. Thirdly, to dispel myths about the field of study. Fourthly, to explain competing conceptual frameworks. Fifthly, to clarify the focus of your research and to justify your assumptions. You should satisfy the following questions in your literature review. Are there sources relevant to the topic of your research? If there are sources, what do they say about the nature and development of the topic? How are the issues researched in existing literature? How detailed and complete are the literature on the topic? How does the literature interpret the concepts and issues on the topic? Does the review indicate clearly when sources are being quoted? Is it the work of the authors or did they borrow it from somebody else? Are sources adequately referenced? And do you agree with the existing literature on the topic? You will need to summarize the existing theory about the topic as a last section of the chapter or chapters. If your study is a literature study, you will move on to conclusions and recommendations at the end of this chapter. That would mean that you will not need to do any field work or experiments. In summary, it is essential that you do as much literature study as you possibly can for two reasons. Firstly, to prepare for the presentation of your study proposal. This does not apply to studies on master's degree level, of course. And secondly, to serve as the foundation for the research that you will embark on. In closing, preparing this chapter or chapters might require many hours of hard work. This will enable you to plan your research properly. Logically, I should discuss doing fieldwork as a next chapter, followed by a recommended solution, and then the synthesis and evaluation of the study. However, there are so many research methods, data collection methods, and methods to analyze data that I will have to discuss all of them one by one. In addition, there are a host of other issues. For example, the paradigms that you will need to consider, epistemology, ontology, etc., that you should be able to use in the last 2 or 3 chapters of your thesis or dissertation. In a way, this is a kind of literature study of the concepts that you will need to be familiar with before you will be able to do practical academic research. Therefore, I will discuss creating a draft thesis or dissertation in my next post. Let me know if there are any issues that you need clarity on urgently. From this point onwards, it is not critically important that we stick to a set sequence in which to discuss further issues. I can easily interrupt my videos to discuss urgent questions first. Good luck with your studies. Thank you.